There is a moment most people experience quietly, usually after a long day of trying to be seen, where the body feels tired in a way sleep does not fix. That exhaustion often comes from performing instead of living. Many grow up learning that being noticed equals being valued, so they chase reactions, approval, laughter, likes, or praise without realizing the cost. The nervous system stays alert, always scanning the room for feedback, always adjusting posture, tone, and opinion to keep the spotlight warm. Over time, this creates a subtle anxiety that never fully switches off. What gets overlooked is that being observed does not automatically mean being regarded with seriousness or trust. In fact, constant visibility can erode inner stability because identity starts leaning on external signals instead of internal alignment. When someone begins to step back from this pattern, discomfort appears first, silence feels risky. Reduced visibility feels like disappearance. Yet this is often the first step toward a calmer form of confidence. As the urge to be noticed softens, something steadier begins to form beneath the surface, preparing the ground for a deeper kind of presence that does not require constant reinforcement. Once the noise quiets, the next shift happens internally rather than socially. Without the pressure to perform, decisions start coming from personal values instead of imagined reactions. This is where self-trust slowly replaces approval-seeking. Many people underestimate how much mental energy goes into managing perception. When that energy is reclaimed, clarity improves. Choices feel cleaner. Boundaries stop feeling cruel and start feeling necessary. This phase can feel lonely because fewer people comment, react, or check in. That absence can be misinterpreted as loss, but it is often a recalibration. Relationships that were built on constant engagement may weaken, while others deepen through consistency and reliability. The mind begins to recognize that not every thought needs to be shared, and not every feeling needs an audience. This restraint builds emotional maturity. It teaches patience and discernment. Over time, others begin to respond differently. Conversations change, expectations adjust. Without chasing validation, behavior becomes more predictable and grounded, which quietly signals strength and reliability, even if no one announces it out loud. As inner steadiness develops, social dynamics subtly shift. People tend to relax around those who are not trying to extract reactions. There is less pressure, less emotional bargaining. This creates a sense of safety that words alone cannot manufacture. When someone speaks less but with intention, their words carry more weight. When promises are made sparingly and kept consistently, credibility grows. This is not about withdrawal or coldness. It is about reducing unnecessary output so that what remains has substance. Many confuse quiet with weakness because society often rewards volume and speed. In reality, restraint communicates discernment. It suggests someone who observes before acting and listens before responding. Over time, this presence reshapes how others engage. Requests become more respectful. Interruptions decrease. People begin to check assumptions instead of imposing them. This change does not happen overnight, and it is rarely dramatic. It unfolds through repeated interactions where calm replaces urgency and consistency replaces performance. Slowly, the social environment adapts to this steadier rhythm. With these changes comes a new relationship with conflict. When identity is no longer tied to being seen or liked, disagreement loses its emotional charge. Feedback can be evaluated instead of absorbed. Criticism no longer feels like a threat to existence. This emotional distance allows for better problem solving and clearer communication. Instead of reacting defensively, responses become measured. This often surprises others, especially those accustomed to emotional escalation. Calm during tension signals self-regulation, a trait deeply associated with leadership and maturity. It also discourages manipulation because emotional hooks no longer work as effectively. This does not mean becoming passive or detached. It means choosing when to engage and when to conserve energy. Over time, this selective engagement reduces burnout and resentment. Conflicts resolve faster or fade entirely because there is no fuel feeding them. This creates space for more meaningful work and relationships, reinforcing the idea that emotional control is not repression, but skillful management. As emotional regulation strengthens, priorities naturally reorganize. Time and energy become resources to be allocated intentionally rather than spent impulsively. Many people realized they were overcommitting to conversations, obligations, and environments that offered stimulation but little growth. With clearer boundaries, life becomes simpler. Not easier, but simpler. Decisions are made based on long-term alignment rather than short-term validation. This shift often improves focus and productivity because distractions lose their grip. The mind can settle into deeper work without constantly checking for external signals. This sustained focus compounds over time, leading to skill development and competence. Competence, unlike visibility, creates lasting confidence. It also attracts opportunities organically because results speak quietly but persuasively. Others begin to notice patterns of reliability and depth rather than bursts of performance. This stage often brings a sense of grounded satisfaction that does not fluctuate wildly with social feedback. With competence comes a different kind of recognition, one that feels earned rather than borrowed. It is subtle and often delayed, but it carries more stability. People begin to seek input rather than offer unsolicited opinions. Trust grows not through self-promotion, but through demonstrated consistency. This form of recognition does not require constant maintenance. It does not disappear when energy dips or mood shifts. It allows for rest without fear of irrelevance. Many describe this phase as a relief. The nervous system relaxes because worth is no longer negotiated daily. This stability improves mental health by reducing anxiety and emotional volatility. Sleep improves. Focus sharpens. Relationships feel less transactional. There is space to be human rather than impressive. This is where motivation shifts from proving to building, from reacting to creating. The drive becomes quieter but more durable. As internal and external stability align, identity becomes less fragmented. Instead of switching roles to fit different audiences, behavior remains consistent across settings. This coherence reduces cognitive load and emotional strain. People often underestimate how exhausting it is to maintain multiple versions of oneself. When those versions collapse into one integrated self, energy returns. Authenticity stops being a performance and becomes a default state. This consistency also simplifies decision-making because values act as a compass. There is less second-guessing and fewer regrets. Life feels more linear and less chaotic. Others may not fully understand this shift, but they feel it. Interactions become smoother because expectations are clear. There is less drama, fewer misunderstandings, and more mutual respect, even if it is never explicitly discussed. Eventually, this way of living reshapes ambition. Goals are chosen for meaning rather than applause. Progress is measured internally rather than publicly. This reduces comparison, which is a major source of dissatisfaction. Instead of constantly scanning others for benchmarks, focus turns inward toward personal standards. This fosters sustainable growth because motivation is not dependent on external reinforcement. Setbacks are processed more constructively because identity is not threatened by temporary failure. This resilience allows for experimentation and learning. Over time, confidence becomes quieter but stronger. It does not need to announce itself because it is felt internally and reflected externally through calm action. As ambition matures, relationships deepen. Without the need to impress, listening improves. Empathy becomes easier because attention is no longer self-focused. Conversations slow down. Presence increases. People feel heard rather than managed. This builds trust and intimacy, both personally and professionally. Conflicts become opportunities for understanding rather than battles for validation. This relational depth reinforces emotional security, creating a positive feedback loop. Life feels less performative and more lived. Satisfaction comes from alignment rather than reaction. People who are anchored internally experience the world differently because their emotional center does not move every time the environment shifts. Praise feels pleasant, but not intoxicating. Criticism feels uncomfortable, but not devastating. This balance comes from a clear understanding of personal values, limits, and intentions. Instead of asking, "How am I being perceived right now?" the internal dialogue becomes, "Am I acting in alignment with what matters to me?" That shift changes how the nervous system responds to daily life. Stressors still exist, but they no longer feel like threats to identity. This stability is not something one is born with. It develops through repeated moments of choosing honesty over approval and consistency over short-term comfort. Over time, The brain learns that safety does not come from external reassurance, but from internal coherence. This reduces emotional dependency on others and creates a sense of grounded confidence that does not fluctuate with social feedback. The result is a calmer presence that others sense intuitively, even if they cannot articulate why. When affirmation is no longer a requirement, behavior becomes more intentional. Decisions are made based on usefulness, ethics, and long-term impact rather than immediate reaction. This often surprises people who are used to emotional bargaining in relationships. The absence of performative behavior can initially feel uncomfortable, both for the individual and for those around them. Silence replaces explanation. Boundaries replace justification. This can be misread as detachment, but it is actually a sign of emotional self-sufficiency. Internally anchored people are not indifferent, they are selective. They invest energy where it aligns with their principles, instead of where it produces the most noise. This selectivity preserves mental bandwidth and reduces resentment. Over time, this approach simplifies life. Fewer commitments are made, but those commitments are honored more fully. This reliability builds trust quietly, without self-promotion, reinforcing the sense that inner stability produces outward credibility. This internal anchoring also changes how success is experienced. Achievements are acknowledged without becoming identity, defining events. Failure is processed as information rather than a verdict. Because self-worth is not outsourced to outcomes, the emotional highs and lows flatten into a steadier rhythm. This emotional regulation improves decision-making under pressure. The mind remains clearer because it is not hijacked by fear of losing approval. People with this foundation are more willing to take calculated risks because their sense of self is not tied to constant validation. They can tolerate uncertainty without panic. This tolerance allows for growth that is sustainable rather than frantic. Over time, confidence becomes quieter but more resilient. It does not need to announce itself or be defended because it is reinforced daily through aligned action rather than external applause.